Okay, lovely. Okay, that's great.
Fix it up so that they can
Yeah,
see.
Okay, lovely.
Okay, Gush, let's go.
Hold on, 1 minute. 1 minute, too.
Lovely.
All right, now I have to just record. Record. Motilal, you are on. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to Poetry and Prose. Today we are featuring local author Jerry Barrow. And to know more about Jerry, Heather Lalto Ferguson would be interviewing Jerry and he would be telling us about himself. Take it away.
Thank you, Motilal. Welcome to retired Captain Gerald Barrow, author of the month for July 2024. He has recently completed his first book, Boy Days, Growing Up in Trinidad, which is a wonderful memoir filled with anecdotal stories of growing up in the 1960s in a Trinidad of a kinder, gentler time. As the byline on the back cover, as his book recalls, it was a time of spinning tops, pitching marbles, climbing trees, flying kites, and making slingshots, all basic skills which every boy possessed, no matter his socio-economic background. Jerry Barrow is the quintessential Renaissance man, with his fingers in so many pies. It's truly an accomplishment to have written such a funny, informative, and engrossing book. Not only is it hilarious in recounting people and places and life situations, it is a record of the history and culture of our island just before and immediately after independence from our colonial masters, as told by a person who truly lives life large. He is an accomplished chef as the main meal provider in his busy household, where his wife, Shahiba, is a practicing physician. He's a philanthropist, head of the Astro Club, responsible for mentoring academically brilliant young people with its accompanying Mayaro summer camps to offer experiencing life skills and fun activities to students and enabling them to fend for themselves in their future lives. And that's where he is right now. He's a question setter for the Astro Club's national quiz. The caliber of his questions have been highly lauded by international quiz masters. He's also a talented portrait artist, as samples in his book will show. An exceptional photographer, he's a recreational sailor with his own boat, a builder of model planes and boats, a sports car and bike enthusiast, a 40-year participant in archery, a musician and trumpeter with his own at-home studio, consorting with the likes of Calypsonians Crazy and Relator. And he's the one responsible for using his mechanical experience to refurbish the chiming clock in the tower of his alma mater, Queen's Royal College. Jerry also had a 32-year career as a BWIA pilot with his own hair-raising experiences, which only adds luster to the man now recognized as an author. In delving further into what makes him tick, here are a few questions. Jerry, how did you come up with the idea of writing a book in the first place, given all the other activities that take up your time? What was your main motivation?
This came about quite by accident. We're having some internet problems here, so I hope everybody's seen it here in the UK. What happened was my wife got a notice from someone in the States who is an Amazon publisher, and she was told that if you submit a manuscript, what you got, Amazon will publish it. You don't have to pay for it, and you just get a percentage of the book sales. So she suggested that I write a book on astronomy. I've been teaching astronomy for almost 20 years now, written a few articles and done dozens of presentations. So I could have done that in my sleep, you know. But then a friend from Glencoe, where I grew up, he came across to spend a few days here in Trinidad, and we started talking about the old days growing up in Kilbracken Road and some of the crazy things that we did. And I thought that if I had to write something, I think that would be more interesting than astronomy. There are enough astronomy books. So I came up with the idea of writing this. Now, you notice that the name of the book is Boy Days and not Boyhood Days. And there's a subtle difference between the two. Every boy has boyhood days, but few boys these days have boy days. And boy days refers to some of the crazy things you did when you were growing up, the skills that you had, the trouble you got into. I have my friend here, Andrew, who has had more than his share as well. But it's something that is lost on this generation. So I just wanted to document some of those things, just as a fun book, really. You know, it wasn't anything serious. It took me about 3 weeks to write it. So that is it. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if I belong in this group because I don't consider myself a writer. I'm gonna consider myself somebody who just happened to write a book, you know, with no intention of writing another one.
Well, I don't know that. I don't know about that. But anyway, well, as all of us fellow writers know, it takes focus and discipline though to write a book. So how do you manage the writing process? What's your optimum time of day to write? Morning, afternoon, night? And the 3 weeks, yeah, you had to really buckle down and get it done. I mean,
Well, yeah, as a baby pilot, I had to wake up at 4 o'clock most mornings. And I was hoping that when I retired, my sleep patterns will get back to normal. That hasn't happened. It's gotten worse. So I tend to wake up about 2 or 3 in the morning. It seems that as you get older, you require less sleep. So what do I do at 2 o'clock in the morning? Well, write a book, you know. So that's how it came about, really.
Actually, that's kind of my favorite time as well. Your brain's fresh from the sleep you just had. Now that the book has been published, how have you gone about marketing it, and what kind of recognition have you received for it thus far?
Well, I haven't gotten a cent so far. So yeah, I may have to choose another vocation now that I'm retired, you know. But what I've been doing really is just handing out free samples to friends and family, and you know, letting people know that okay, if you like the book, also you know, pass your word along. The thing is, few people read these days, so I think that most of the people have given the book to, they've probably just read the forward or something, and it's collecting dust somewhere. You know, I think that if the couple of people who have taken the time to read the book have gotten good reviews from it.
Yes, it's hilarious, really. It's funny. Now you said you were speaking to the manager of a bookstore she's going to do a book launch for you.
Yes, one of the few people who actually read the book, she called me up and she said she's halfway through the book. This is about the day after I gave it to her. And she immediately ordered 25 copies because she said that this book is going to do well. And she owns a bookshop in a mall. And she said that at Christmas time, when the mall is crowded, she would like to do a launch. I also have plans for doing a launch at QRC, which you know only too well. A friend of mine is helping me with that. Unfortunately, the principal is out of the country at this time. So when he comes back, we may do a launch, but it'll be more of like a get together. We'll have food to eat. He and I will bring out our guitars and play some songs, things like that. It'll be more of a fun line. I might just hand out books free. This is not a money making thing for me at all.
Well, you know, it's sometimes for us authors, it's you know, it's the love of the craft really rather than the money. But you know, it offer free food and people will come.
Especially Curiosity Boys, yes. Once your word gets out. Or in fact, wait, no, we need to invite some girls as well.
The Bishop's girls, you know, always waiting in the wings. Anyway, no doubt you are, you know, anyone who reads your book will realize what a skilled storyteller you are. So what plans do you have to follow up? Book 1, book 2, book 3? What about writing about your experiences in the airlines?
I have to be a little bit careful because obviously these are people who are still flying, who are still my friends. There's no way I could disguise. If I told a story, there'll be no way I could disguise. So there are a couple of stories. I did mention my experience with one person, a very difficult person, and I was able to talk about him because he's dead now. You know, he can't come back to haunt me. But but I wouldn't like to go into any details. It's a very delicate thing with people's reputations, things like that. So
Well, at
whatever.
least in I was going to say, at least in Boy Days, we have a sample of some of your BWIA experiences, you know, like that
Yeah.
landing in Manzanilla there, you know, taking the plane apart. That was classic. I like that one.
Yeah, different people have zeroed in on different things. I don't know why you should zero in on that particular incident.
I don't know. I'm familiar with my Manzanilla as well, you know, but yeah, I have my own wreckage story on Manzanilla. But
Okay,
it involves a boat. Yeah, the Santa Filomena that drifted onto shore when I was about just in the 1970s, early 1970. So yeah, that's another story. But
Yeah, well, in this case, the guy did a perfectly good landing in Mansalina. It was an emergency landing. He ran out of gas, but the engineers who came to salvage the plane, they literally tore it apart. And the reason for that is insurance. You know,
Yeah.
because the insurance are quick to come and examine the plane and find, you know, some pilot error or something, so they can void your policy. But when you dismantle the plane into 100 pieces, it's hard for them to say what the problem was. And in fact, there's a saying in the industry that if the pilot dies, it was his fault. If the pilot lives, you'll never know what really happened.
Well, you're not afraid that the insurance company going to sue you retroactively now that you've let the cat out of the bag?
No. There's a statute of limitations, and I've checked that.
Well, we have so many little pieces to read here. So without further ado, we'll proceed to the reading. So Motilal, I'll hand it back to you, and you will come up with the first reader.
Hi, real
Thank
quick.
you.
I had to mute and take everyone's videos off because I wanted to have a side by side for the interview. Okay, so if you
Okay.
would like to unmute and turn your videos on, you can feel free to do so at this time.
Thank you, Heather and Gusha. And our first reader is Harold Graves, and Harold would be reading Uncle Paul and Mayaro. Take it away, Harold.
All right, let me see if I can find it here. Hold on. All right, here we go. Can you hear me, Moti?
Yes, we can.
All right, good. This is an excerpt called Mayaro. My mom was a radiographer at the Port of Spain General Hospital. As such, she was allowed access to the various traveling officers' quarters scattered around the country. Our holidays were spent in remote places like Toco, Matalat, and Cedros. Our favorite destination was Mayaro. The caretaker had a string band of children for us to play with, along with their assortment of goats, dogs, and chickens. No TV or internet, our nights were spent listening to folk tales about La Dabalès, Douan, and Soukian. There were also stories about characters like Thinfoot and Big Belly who liked to steal breadfruit. Big Belly got his belly busted on a rusty nail on the tree, while Thinfoot got his foot stuck in an ant's hole while running away. Pulling seine was an exciting event in which you helped the fishermen haul in their large nets. These would be filled with fish, baby sharks, and stingrays. Anyone who helped pull would get a fish. You could also scoop up the sardines and put them in a bucket. You then coat them in flour and threw them live into hot oil, known as fry dry. They were a delicious snack. We'd catch crabs in the moonlight and learn to set bird traps and climb coconut trees. We ate chip, oysters, and delicious coconut bread. That's inside the kernel of a young coconut plant. Few people these days know about that. And here is the second excerpt known as Uncle Bill. The 5 streets in Glencoe ended at the river, which defined the western boundary. Across the river was the fishing village of Point Cumana, inhabited by underprivileged people. Despite their indigent condition, crime was unknown. The only Indians living there were Mr. Chinapoo, the tailor, and his family. He sewed our school uniforms and did odd jobs. There's a saying about tailors' children having the worst clothes. That was certainly true of his girls. All their dresses were crudely hand-stitched. I guess it was easier to sew new clothes than wash the old ones. The most colorful character in the junction was Old Man Fitzallen, a Dutchman who owned most of the land. I'm told that on Friday nights he'd get drunk, ride down the street on his horse, and shoot up the place. The next day, when sober, he would pay for the damages. He had his own church, which we attended. He gave fiery sermons and handed out text, which we were supposed to memorize, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, etc. He had a shed at the back, which he leased to Harold Laborde to build his boat, Hummingbird, which he used to sail around the world. His son, Bill, was related to us through marriage to his sister, Carmen, who was married to my father's uncle, Oscar. Bill came into money when his father died and never did a day's work. He was the village ram and the village drunk. He was our favorite uncle since rum made him sweet. He impregnated many of the village women and had a herd of half-naked mulatto children living in his house. We never got to know them, even though we figured they were related somehow. And that's it. Those are fascinating.
Okay, thank you, Harold, for that reading. And indeed, Jerry,
Yeah.
listen to those stories. I can see that you can expand them. You could make them longer. And indeed, you have a lot of boy days. Well, the next reader is me. And I will be reading Storm and extract about Dr. Dalip Singh. So here goes. Storm. Our boat was an old wooden pirogue which used to leak. Around that time, fiberglass was becoming popular. So Keith and I decided to cover the hull with that expensive material. To do so, we had to drive the boat from its mooring in Stoble's Bay to a slipway in Point Cumana. And then we would get some fishermen to help drag it to our house, rolling it on logs. In those days, you didn't pay people for help. We all pulled together. You just needed a nip of punch and rum to wet your teeth. They would then throw some on the ground for good luck. All fishermen communicated in patois, a kind of broken French still spoken in St. Lucia. It kept the white bosses from knowing what they were saying about them. That day, there was a big storm with heavy rain and thunder. Keith and I set off anyway. With us, there was no such thing as fear, only tunnel vision and rank stupidity. While passing Point God, an enormous wave lifted the boat, which came down with a sickening crunch. It loosened some of the caulking between the boards, and water came gushing in like a fountain. I threw my shirt for Keith to plug the hole. By the time he stopped the leak, the water was up to the gunwale. We rounded the point and managed to get the carronage before it sank. There, I saw a shouter Baptist priest baptizing some women in the sea. I asked him to borrow his calabash and use it to bail the boat. It took a long time while the devotees stood and waited impatiently for their salvation. There's a story about a priest baptizing a woman in Mayaro. When a big wave broke, and washed her away. The priest turned to the others on the beach and said, "The Lord give it, and the Lord take it." Send the next one. There was also a joke in which a priest ducked a guy underwater for a while. He then asked, "Did you see Jesus?" "No, Father," replied the man. The priest dipped him again and got the same response. The third time, he kept him under water for a full minute. When asked, "Did you see Jesus?" the guy sputtered, "No, Father. You sure you under there?" In another version in our village, the priest ducked the guy and asked him if he believed. No, after the third ducking, the guy said, "I believe you want to drown my ass." That's just a bit that I added that. Now we go up to the other piece. This is about Dalip Singh. Unfortunately, my dad is probably best known for his involvement in the Dalip Singh murder case. Dalip and my dad knew each other in England as medical students. He was engaged to a German woman named Inge. As Jewish children, she and her sister were smuggled out of Nazi Germany and cared for by a Scottish family. My mother would often use her ration coupons to provide dinner for them. When, as qualified doctor, they returned to Trinidad and had little contact with each other. Dalip and Inge got married, but things didn't work out. One day in 1954, he asked my dad to borrow his textbook on anatomy and his surgical instruments. He murdered his wife and used my dad's tool to cut up her body, which he put in a sack and dumped in the sea. It was washed up on the beach sometime later. That day, Dalip dropped by my mom, which was strange since they had not seen each other for quite a while. She called my dad, who told her he was doing a post-mortem on a white woman. On hearing this, Dalip said he would go and assist. Little did my dad know that the woman on the slab was Inge. Dalip pretended he didn't know either. It took a while, but Singh was eventually arrested and charged with murder. During the trial, my dad testified that whoever cut up Inge's body had a knowledge of anatomy. He had done a neat job. Singh was found guilty and remains the only doctor in Trinidad to be hanged. That remains the most famous criminal case in Trinidad history. Now, I just like to make a few comments here. I remember the story about Dr. Dalip Singh. And in my time growing up, I remember that there were two songs that people used to sing in my village about this incident, because at that time, it was a sort of calypso, but Indians weren't singing calypso at that time. So they had a sort of hybrid with Indian melody and calypso. So here's an example of how they commented on this Dalip Singh case. Here goes. Ladies and gentlemen, listen attentively. Ladies and gentlemen, listen attentively about the man who murdered the white lady. About the man who murdered the white lady. And as I suppose some of us would know that the fellow who arrested broke the case was a gentleman called Inspector Slater. And in my time, there was also a song about that. I remember a few lines. It goes like this. Inspector Slater, he went to Grenada. Inspector Slater, he went to Grenada. He come back and charge Dalip Singh with murder. So, ladies and gentlemen, listen attentively about the man who murdered the white lady.
Lovely.
Very
There was
good.
also another thing with a bit of Hindi that the people used to sing. It used to go like this. Suno ji suno, Dr. Singh ka kiya, Inapala Singh ka galikatia. And I think they was referring to Dr. Dalip Singh and Inge Paula, as she was known. So I hope I'm glad for your indulgence as I try my singing skills. And I thank you, Mr. Barrow, for allowing me to read this extract. Thank you.
Well, I just have a little comment to make in that my dad never once spoke about this case. And the only way I found out about it or got the details was that not too long ago, sometime last year or so, there was a woman, I think it was a woman. She was writing a book on Ing or Inge, whatever her name is. It wasn't about Dalip Singh. Because Inge herself had quite an interesting story. She was a Jew in Nazi Germany at the time that they were gathering people to put them in concentration camps. And she was managed, she and her sister were fortunate to be smuggled out just before her parents and the rest of her family were captured. She never saw her family again. And they were taken across to England and adopted by a Scottish family. And then I got the rest of the story. Now, the thing about my mom, even though she lived till 99, she had a razor sharp memory. And she was able to give this writer all the details about Inge, every single thing. And I sat down there and just listened in fascination. So the whole case and everything at all, she remembered conversations with Inge and lots of things. Obviously, you were saying that I could write a lot more on some of these stories, but I don't want to make it boring. I'm a concise person, very, very concise. So that's as far as I was willing to go. But I try as much as possible to verify the facts, and I'm pretty confident that every story that I've written is the absolute truth.
Yes, indeed, because there is truth in that story also, because like in those days when the Indians, we didn't have Indians singing calypso, but they should make their own commentary, and those two songs are commentaries that I remember about that Dalip Singh murder. So thank you for the opportunity, and any other comments, please?
Well, Jerry, it's Heather here. I just noticed in the chat that Helen Watley, a colleague of mine from Bishop Anstey, is in the gallery here today. She just mentioned that her father worked with your father and spoke quite highly of him. So I didn't know if you knew how to access the chat, but I don't know if Helen wants to expand on that.
Oh, I just go ahead, Jerry.
No, you
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to say, when I read your that section of your book, it made me a little sad because it implied that was what your dad, Dr. Russell Barrow, was best remembered for. And at least in the case of my father, not at all. He used to refer to your father as a polymath, as you said, someone who was so knowledgeable and skilled in so many areas. And, I just wanted to say that Dr. Barrow was a very distinguished person. And, that one incident, I don't think really damaged him.
Hi, I just want to say that I know your dad. I am Jerry's wife, Shahiba, and I am a physician as well. I joined into specialist center where your dad had an office.
Right.
Yeah, it's a small world. And I remember your dad being a brilliant physician, really brilliant. And those guys were good old colleagues, both Russell Barrow and your dad. Yeah.
And that was Dr. Watley?
Yes, that is Dr. Watley.
That was a cardiologist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was my cardiologist.
And you're still here? Look at that, you're still here.
Is that right?
You said it.
It was funny. Going by his office, I had to keep a straight face. He was a little absent-minded at times. There was one time he used some tissue paper, I think, to wipe off the gel or whatever it is, and he stuck the end in his pocket, and then wherever he walked, he just unrolled this roll of toilet paper. So I had to keep a straight face, you know.
Small world.
Small world.
Okay. Indeed, a small world, because I was talking to one of my friend, Shelly Ann Sumra, Jerry, and she said she worked with you.
Yes. There were over 100 flight attendants, and we would fly with any one, maybe 2 or 3 times for the year. So I was the one who had to write their names in the book. So I got to know all their names. But up to now, to put names to faces is difficult because obviously they would be in the cabin, we in the cockpit, we wouldn't see them. We would see them briefly in the bus going to New York or Miami. And then after that, everybody goes shopping in different directions. So
yeah, she might be joining us in a little while. So
if I see her face, I would recognize her right away. But the name is familiar. I got along well with everyone, so that's fine.
Okay. Any other comments before we move along?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Moving right along, our next reader would be Frank Mohan, and Frank would be reading Peeping Toms and Hindu Wedding. You know, I think those two things go together. You know, because I remember Hindu weddings when they go for Matikor. As little boys, we used to be the Peeping Toms. So, okay, Frank, take it away.
Hi. Just before I read, I want to welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. Winston Rajkumar. He's on the grid here. He's a pulmonologist and intensive care specialist here in Windsor, and he went to QRC as well back in the early 60s. And in fact, he told me the little joke about the last name Laltu. That's Heather's father when he was principal there. That his father's name was Lal, and his name was Lal too. Hence Laltu. So welcome Winston today. Oh, by the way, he's also a sleep specialist, and you guys were talking about waking up at 2 and 3 in the morning to write. Maybe he might have a comment about that.
Well, tell him I don't sleep at all, you know. Lal to daughter don't sleep.
But
well, I do that very often. I'll wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and I'll have an idea and I'll think I better get up and write it down, which I do. So it's a fairly common thing with writers, I think.
Sorry, guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we get older, our sleep architecture changes, and we tend to be larks. We go to bed early and we wake up early. We're no longer owls. We used to be owls when we were undergraduates in university, right? You go to bed very late and then we wake up very late.
What about the 4 hours in the middle of the night that you're awake?
That's chronic insomnia if it happens very frequently. It's called maintenance insomnia. Insomnia could be initiation or maintenance. That's a difficult thing to treat, and we don't treat that with drugs, sleeping pills, they don't work, and that requires some sort of therapy.
Dr.
That's okay. That's when I write.
Oh, that's good then. Yeah, at least you use the time productively. Hello, yes.
Shiva wants to make a comment.
I just wanted to say to you, one of the things, if you remember, the first thing that when you become a doctor is you learn how not to sleep.
That's what messed up my sleep. Doing critical care medicine for 40 years. You don't sleep. Well, you try to sleep, but the nurses and the patients don't let you sleep, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's probably the same thing for pilots as well. When your sleep patterns vary from day to day.
No, the word pattern assumes some degree of order.
There's no order when you're an intensivist or OBGYN. There's no order, you know.
Correct.
Well, back to Frank now.
Okay, so my excerpt is called Peeping Toms.
Right.
So here goes. The Ferreras used to rent an annex behind their house to an American woman. She had a young son named Jack who played with us. After dropping him off at school, a guy named Mr. Kuja, he would come and visit her. Richard, who knew more about these things figured that something fishy was going on. Her windows were frosted, so he couldn't see through. This had him quite frustrated. One day, after she left to drop Jack, he persuaded me to come with him and hide in the room. I slipped into the closet while Richard crawled under the bed. He wanted to be the one close. He wanted to be close in on the action. It wasn't long before the mother and Mr. Kulja came in and started doing the thing. I got a bird's eye view, but Richard couldn't see squat. His head was getting also, his head was also getting banged up by the action. He started to crawl out from below the bed till his face was right between them. And that's when Koja saw him. He grabbed him by his neck and started to cuss. By then, I'd seen enough for one day and figured it was time to leave. I came out busting out of that cupboard and all hell broke loose. I was out of there in a flash, leaving Richard to sort things out. Not my circus, not my monkeys. And that's Peeping Toms. And Hindu wedding. Terry and I went everywhere with our cameras. That gained us access to private functions since people thought we were from the press. If while driving through the countryside, we came across an Indian wedding, we'd just stroll in and be treated like honored guests. That took care of food and entertainment for the evening. The first time I ate at a Hindu wedding, the food was placed in front of me on a large fig leaf. This consisted of dal, rice, and a sappy assortment of pureed vegetables. I waited for a knife and fork, but realized that everyone was eating with their hands. I don't mind eating roti with my hands, but this runny mess was something else. I was only half Indian and was feeling awkward. I wondered how Terry, being Chinese, was making out. I looked across and I saw him happily scooping up the food and stuffing it in his mouth. At another wedding, the proud father of the bride insisted I go into his daughter's bedroom, where intricate henna designs were being drawn on her hands. I tried my best, but couldn't persuade the pretty young girl to smile. I soon realized why. It was an arranged marriage, and the groom was a drunken old slob who she'd only met a week before. He looked like he'd beat her if her sada roti wasn't round or didn't swell. She would have to live with him and his witchy mother in a board house in Monkey Trace, Barrackpore, far removed from her comfortable home in Lange Park. Hindu fathers were quick to marry off their daughters, who were considered a useless burden. They would often have to pay a large dowry to get them off their hands. These girls would be treated like slaves and would only gain some standing when they had a boy child. I found it strange that they would go on to treat their own daughter-in-law the same way one day. And that's the wedding.
Thank you, Frank. And anybody want to make any comments?
Boy, that's very sad, you know. I wonder, I don't suppose that still happens today, does it? When did it stop?
No. I think that with education and with the improvement of, your status or your interaction, that a lot of that has stopped.
However,
Yeah.
it's still prevalent in rural India, where very often, if they're not happy with the girl, they will demand a bigger dowry, which the parents often couldn't afford to pay. And if they couldn't pay, there was something called bride burning, in which you will actually set the girl on fire. And when a pathologist comes or the doctor comes to do to give the death certificate, they will say, well, the stove caught fire. And he will just put that down as a cause, knowing fully well that it has happened.
It has, but it doesn't happen now anymore.
I think in rural India, anything is possible. But unfortunately, in Trinidad, we don't have bride burning in Trinidad.
I am reminded of something from a film called Around the World in 80 Days, in which there's a scene where a bride is unwillingly about to be burned along with her dead husband.
Yes.
And she's saved from that in a very comedic fashion. But apparently it was actually a real thing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
There's a name for it.
I don't know what's the name for it.
Sati. I think it's called Sati.
Sati, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, times change.
Yeah, times change now. These days, them daughter-in-law beating up the mother-in-law and father-in-law. So times change. But yes, it's good to recall those times. And he was a lucky man, Frank. That camera take you everywhere. Sorry, Jerry.
What is also interesting, I don't know if you all are aware, but in the times when the British were here, weddings that were from Hindus and Muslims were not recognized. So that even though you got married according to Muslim rite or Hindu rites, all the children were considered illegitimate.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
so that all of maybe your parents, or more so, no, not my parents, but my grandparents, and so all of them were considered, the children of those marriages were illegitimate. It's only with independence and we becoming a republic those things would change. So a lot of practices. So it's not uncommon. I mean, this story is a sad one in the fact that these girls had to get married according to arranged marriages and so on. Sometimes it was not always, in the best favor of the girls. But I think with times those things have changed.
Thank God.
Okay, thank you. I see my friend Vishnu there. I think Vishnu want to make a comment, Vish? Vishnu.
Yep, he has to unmute.
Vishnu, can you unmute, please? Vish? Yeah, go ahead.
No,
Still not
Vishnu,
in.
we're not here. Yeah, go ahead.
That came into politics. It had nothing to do with independence. Before you were married under Hindu rights under bamboo, as it was said, and you weren't considered legal. But that has changed since 46.
46?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, stand
India.
corrected about that. Okay.
Thanks,
I
Vish.
think in my book, if you read a little bit further on, it goes into the history of how how those laws were changed. It doesn't have to do with independence, but
Yeah, well, this is it.
Yeah.
Not independence, but those rules were changed subsequently.
I try to put historical references, mix it in with my story, for the sake of explanation, So it's in the book.
Each of these little excerpts is like a little gem,
Yes.
Really quite extraordinary.
Well, actually, when Heather told me that she needed 10 excerpts, I had to scratch my brain to find out, well, which 10, because the whole book is just anecdotes. So if she had asked for 100, I could have easily given her 100 as well. In fact, all the ones I gave her just really covered the first 20 years of my life. So there was another 50 still to come.
Yeah, and once he started to learn how to cuss, he left out those ones. So you'll have to buy the book. You'll have to buy the book and read those ones.
Okay, thanks. Michael Barrow wants to comment on something. Michael, go ahead.
Hi,
Oh,
so
Michael.
I'm Gerald Barrow's son. I'm tuning in from the UK. Just wanted to say congrats to my dad for writing this book and getting an opportunity to participate in this group. We grew up listening to a lot of the stories that were in that book, but reading the book, there were a lot more stories that he didn't tell us. So, so it's a good chance to see the other side of things that he grew up with. But I could just attest that as crazy as the stories in the book are, the real life Jerry Barrow is a lot more crazy.
Okay, thank you for that, Michael. Thank you. And moving right along, our next reader is Heather Lalku Ferguson. Is Heather who introduced Jerry Barrow to this group. So Heather would be reading QRC and Sandron. Take it away, Heather.
Thank you, Motilal. Despite minor distractions, I passed my CE exam for Fatima College. I wasn't entirely pleased since that was my third choice. I persuaded my father to pull some strings and get me transferred to Queen's Royal College. All my male relatives had gone there. Plus, I didn't want to go to school with a silly name like Fatima. Who is Fatima anyway? On the first day of college, we wore our dress uniform, which included gray trousers, khaki socks, white shirt, striped tie, and a navy blue blazer. As was the tradition, my friends and I went back to Tranquility to show off. Mr. Williams, who only months before blazed us for being dotish, paraded us in front of the class as shining examples of intellect and scholarship. Unfortunately, that dress uniform is no longer in use. The QRC principal at the time was Mr. Lal, too, affectionately known as Dalal. Though short and round in stature, he was universally feared and respected. Once, as was often the case, we had a free period with no supervision. Some guys at the back started a poker game using real money. It was then that Dalal entered the room. The ones who saw him immediately brought out their Spanish books and pretended to work. However, one miserable fellow named Gosain, whose back was to the door, didn't notice his presence. He continued dealing cards while smoking a funny-looking cigarette. Sensing that something was amiss, he glanced up and saw Dalal glaring down at him. He took a long last drag of his joint, stumped it out, and followed the principal to his office for a caning. For a really serious transgression, a master could send a student for the black book. He would enter the offense and the boy would have to take it back to the office. Depending on what was written, Dalal would sometimes cane the offender over the PA system. Most guys would walk slowly around the building a few times before handing in the book, hoping like a boxer to be saved by the bell. That's the end of the QRC Lal story. He was a man, eh, Jerry?
Yeah, you know, you told me how students would come to your house and line with him and so on. I just can't imagine that at all. Maybe they were coming to see you. That's all I could say.
No, I was too young. I was about 10. But this is when he was just an English master. He was not yet a principal. The principal thing went to his head now, you know. But when he was a simple English teacher from Spinal, one of his favorite students was David Elcock. You know, so he is a common day. Yeah, so David Elcock now, he came, you know, one joke that lasts in our family to this present day. David Elcock came, he was depressed one day, and Daddy said, well, what wrong, boy? He said, man, my girlfriend dropped me. So Dad said, you know, every time they came liming and thing, they used to come on bikes, these guys, after school. And the next time he came, Daddy said, well, how you making out? You see the girl? He said, man, Mr. Altu, I see the girl the other day down the street. I passed she like 2 full trolley bus. So now I still use that expression. When you want to really snub somebody, you pass them like 2 full trolley buses. That is David Alcock. But David Alcock, when he got on the radio and Daddy used to visit Trinidad, he used to get on the radio and say, oh, you're here? Mr. Altu back in town. And then, of course, when he used to do the obits, he used to come out and read, so-and-so passed away and the funeral will be this and that. But once he came across somebody he knew, he did that whole thing and he said, oh God, you mean he dead? Right on the air. He was a funny guy. That's very much so.
But apart from the main Curiosity building, people are not aware that there's another side building known as the West Block.
Yeah.
And most of the classes were there. And when your dad would come into the West Block, the word would just get around that the lull on the block, and you could hear a pin drop. So
when he was going to drop me in Bishops, he would be driving the car and I would be in the back seat. But he would forbid me from looking toward Curiosity where the boys were. I had to keep my head straight. He would look in the rearview mirror to make sure my head straight. So, and then the boys, knowing that, would try to wave and thing and, distract me, But yeah, he was something else. And the thing is, they're so strict with you in Trinidad, you can't leave the front gate of your yard. And then they turn you loose in university in North America, Well, anyway.
No, you see, the reason for that is they are concerned about what people say about their daughter. So once a girl is under their roof, they have to keep them locked up. When they're up in the States, or they can do what the heck they want because nobody can talk. That is what it's all about.
But anyway, talking about girls, I'm going to, you had a few in your youth that look like here, Jerry. So we're going to talk about Sandra.
Okay.
She lived
By
on
the way, my
Clifton.
wife is here.
Well,
Right,
you
right.
write this,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I don't know if you read that part.
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right, safe. Go ahead.
Sandra, she lived on Clifton Hill, Laventille Hill. Anything east of the Dry River behind the bridge was gangster territory. Her house was at the very top of a long flight of steps. One night, as I was walking up the winding road to visit her, I saw 3 brothers sitting on the culvert. I know trouble when I see it. Surely enough, as I got closer, one of them got up and started walking towards me. As he came close, I looked him in the eye and slowly reached into my back pocket. He stopped abruptly and allowed me to pass. I then took out my kerchief and mopped my sweaty brow. On Fridays, I would go with Sandy and her many sisters to their small evangelical church in Newtown. The young people were friendly and I enjoyed singing the songs. I was beginning to think this religion thing might not be so bad after all. Maybe I should give it a shot. One night, the pastor had an altar call. That's where all those who were prepared to devote their life to Christ had to raise their hands and come forward. Even though I had been thinking about it, I hadn't reached that level of commitment. I still liked my wayward ways and material stuff. I didn't want to deceive the pastor in case there was a special place in hell for people who did that. As such, I remained seated, which was very obvious to say the least. The next Friday, when I went to pick up Sandra, there was a prayer circle in progress. They were praying for my everlasting soul. Each one tried to outdo the other in condemning me, threatening me with fire and brimstone. The pastor told Sandy that a good Christian girl could not be dating a sinner. She had to choose between me and Jesus. I said that was unfair. I tried walking on water once and nearly drowned. She had to end our relationship, but we remain close friends to this day. Boy, you really have the gift, that all these girls are still friendly with you. and your wife sitting down next to you, and you're still keeping her.
No, you see, I never broke up with anybody. They all broke up with me. Except this one.
Well, what I can say, any comments?
Please.
My comment is that today is a wonderful session. I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
These
Thank
are
you,
really
Steve.
delightful, really delightful, absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. I wish people would read it though.
Thank you. Okay. Aline, you want to say something, please?
Yeah, I mean, I love the humor. I love all of that rich story. And I know that you say that you don't want to maybe write more of it, but you can do some of these stories in fiction, not, calling names or anything like that. But I think, for example, this Sandra, this is a wonderful story. So I hope that you would continue writing, right? Because I think it's wonderful. Actually, I'm going to go get the book now. Thanks.
Well, actually, I can write a lot more, but I'd immediately be arrested and excommunicated. So that will have to remain. That book will be published after my death. 75 years after, they can open the files, and Heather could publish it for me. But
Yeah, he sent me a few excerpts already. Trevor, I see you laugh. You killing yourself laugh.
Trevor, you there?
You know, I keep thinking of a comment from Voltaire, who said, "The way to bore people is to tell everything." And so it's nice. It's nice that you're leaving more to the imagination. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Harold. I agree with you. So moving right along, because we have
wonder
a lot of
Trevor
readings to
wanted
get
to make a
through.
comment.
I'll comment a little later. Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, Trevor.
Okay, moving
Hey,
right
Trev.
along. Okay, Trevor wants to say something. Trevor, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I
Yeah,
said I'll
Trev.
comment a little later on. Hi Heather, hi Helen, hi Jerry and Shahiba. If you want any authentication of what has happened, I will be able to provide some documentation at a later time.
Thank you. Okay, so moving right along, our next reader is Leslie Ann Beckles, and Leslie Ann would be reading Mrs. Roach 1 and 2, and was that Schofield. Okay, Leslie Ann, you're on.
Standard 3 teacher, Mrs. Roach, was a nasty piece of work. She was a big, strong woman who resembled a rhinoceros, both in shape and temperament. Her husband was involved with another teacher, so she took out her frustrations on her students. She would beat the entire class just to achieve harmony. I got my first taste of her medieval malevolence on our first or second day in her class. She said, "All those who didn't do their homework, line up in front." Homework? Good Lord. Who the F gives homework on the first day? I stood at the end of the line with 6 other trembling wimps. She started from her side. "Why didn't you do your homework?" "Miss, I forgot." "Oh, you forgot? I will fix your memory. Stay right there." The next guy claimed he was sick. She said, "Wait till I finish with you. You will need an ambulance. Remain there." Each guy came up with a more creative excuse, including a power cut, flash flood, a dog eating his book, and the train having a flat tire. All to no avail. I was last and realized I had to come up with something original. The usual stuff wasn't cutting it. When asked, I told her that the previous teacher never gave homework, so I wasn't accustomed. She interrupted. "You blaming the other teacher for not doing your homework? The rest of you sit down." Needless to say, I got it for all 6 who were happy to spectate. That's excerpt 1. Mrs. Roach, part 2. Mrs. Roach once got a cane from somewhere down south, which she soaked in brine for 3 days. It seemed the tambourine and guava whips were not hacking it. They shattered too easily. The cane was flexible and would last longer. After school, Richard and I picked the lock on her cupboard door and took the cane home. We chopped it into small pieces, burnt it with kerosene, and buried the ashes in an unmarked grave. No way she was using that on us. The most feared rod in the school belonged to the 5th standard teacher, Mr. Stanford. He got a piece of mahogany from a sawmill, then shaped it and varnished it into a thing of beauty. It resembled a billiard cue. On the handle, he engraved the words, "The Tickler," a reference to something in Dickens I was unfamiliar with. Once, after a particularly grave offense, probably getting a sum wrong, Mrs. R sent a boy for the tickler. When she was finished with him, she had reduced the fine piece of furniture to splinters. When he returned the remains to its owners, he said, "She broke this on you?" "Yes, sir," said the hapless boy. "My good whip," said Stanford, and started to blaze the boy with his belt. Years later, I used to ride home from Curaçao on my bike. I knew she lived in St. James, which was on my route. I always hoped I'd see her crossing the road so I could knock her down and say, "Oopsie." I also thought of poisoning her with jumbie beads. These are pretty black and red seeds which we use to make jewelry. They are highly poisonous. I thought of putting some in her coffee mug, but wasn't sure of the dose. She would be hard to kill. While all the teachers administered corporal punishment, she went too far. I was told a story by a friend who was in our class. He said that one of his classmates, Anthony, who now an eminent cardiologist, noticed her in hospital while doing his ward round. He checked her chart and saw her condition. He leaned over and said, "Miss Roach, you remember me?" She opened her eyes and said, "Tony, is that you?" He said, "Yes, miss. And I just want to tell you, you got dead." I don't know if this story is true, but that's what I heard. So that is part 2. And now for Schofield.
Thank you, Leslie Ann. You know, most of us in this group must have felt the whip and the strap when we were going to school, you know. So I don't know if anybody will have any comments on this story before we move along to the.
I have one more piece.
Oh, you have one more piece. Go
Yes,
ahead,
one more
Leslie.
piece. It's so excitable.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Throughout my life, I've only done well at things which are of practical value. As such, I was particularly bad at geometry and Latin. I didn't see how a triangle touching the sides of a circle would change my life in any meaningful way. As for Latin, it was a dead language, which should have been cremated a long time ago. I used to get negative percentages since 1 mark was subtracted for every error made. Our Latin teacher, Schofield Pilgrim, was an avid cricket fan. Before the class, someone would raise a controversial point, such as Roy Fredericks being a better opener than Conrad Hunt. That would set him off on a tangent. We then sit back and relax while he vigorously disputes the claim, all thoughts of Latin mercifully forgotten. Schofield was also a pianist and a leader of the Curaçao Jazz Band. I taught myself to play the trumpet and became the frontman of that venerable institution. I replaced another student, Hilton, who smoked weed and would play off-key then when high. While on stage, Sco would point at you and you'd have to start improvising. It was a magical time for me, jamming with guys who would go on to become professional musicians. There's no closer bond than members of a band. Each was respected for his talent and virtuosity. We were invited to play at various school events around the country. I had use of my mother's old Hillman and we'd squeeze the whole group into it, including drums, amplifier, double bass, and tenor pan. The guys had to lie on the floor, but we enjoyed every minute. I once played guitar for the St. Joseph's Choir at the school's music festival. During rehearsals, I developed a crush on the lovely guitarist, Nancy. While on stage at Queen's Hall, we were chatting happily and forgot why we were there. A nasty look from the choir mistress cued us in. Sadly, I never saw Nancy again. I always thought that no girl would be interested in me, so never tried a thing. Not being booked, I was afraid of rejection. Thank you. Lovely stories.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie Ann, and I invite comments from the audience.
Yes, that Schofield Pilgrim was before he went to QRC. He taught in Naparima College, and he taught me Latin as well. And we would easily sidetrack him with questions about jazz. So we have something in common there.
Yeah, we didn't know enough about jazz to sidetrack him with that, but we cricket was his other passion, so we just had to come up with something controversial, and he would just go off.
I was taught Latin by a nun, Sister Agnes Joseph, and she really taught it well, because as far as she was concerned, it was not in any way, shape, or form a dead language. That language is still very much alive and well.
Well, they said that the reason for studying Latin is because English was derived from Latin, so that learning Latin helps you with English. But I say, why just not learn English, and forget about it.
I can see what you're saying there, because I went to University of Saskatchewan, and we had to get a degree, you had to have a foreign language back in the 60s. And I chose Latin because I wasn't good at languages. And I was so intent on passing this course, I would wake up late at night studying Latin. And one night I dreamt that I was having coffee with Caesar. And I told that we had to translate Virgil. And I told that to the professor, who was a Jesuit priest. So he told me to take a couple of days off. He was afraid I was going off the deep end.
But the sort of passages we had to translate was, "Oh, General, you have waylaid our native land." I mean, how am I going to bring that up into a conversation, If I don't see the use of something, my mind just switches off, honestly. I become a total moron.
On the first excerpt, in my first book called The Peripatetic Skylark, I covered corporal punishment in Trinidad in a couple of chapters, which I thought you covered quite well on the funny side.
Well, it wasn't funny.
It wasn't funny.
It wasn't funny at the time, believe me. Ask Trevor.
Okay.
Trevor, Daddy,
Okay,
ever
thank
came
you.
here? Trevor, Daddy, ever came here?
For me?
I was I was one of the good boys.
Oh.
along with In and Hans.
I was in school with Trevor, and I ain't nothing but this good boy thing at all,
Khaled, Khaled, you were in the jazz band with Jerry and Schofield Pilgrim.
Yeah, Jerry taught me to play "In the Mood" by Glenn Miller, and we used to play that. We used to play that to attract the girls from San Francisco and Bishops.
Yeah, we did. Colin and I played at a concert, and we played some songs from the Tijuana Brass. And we wanted to dress up like Mexicans. We didn't have Mexican outfits, so we came on stage in pajamas. Remember that?
Yes.
Oh my God!
And I also remember Jerry came up with this idea when to start the session, that we should have Schofield Pilgrim on the and the drummer playing the bossa nova beat. It's supposed to sound like rain. So Jerry had me to get an umbrella, and I had to come on the stage holding the umbrella over my head with Schofield Pilgrim pretending to play rain. So
I forgot about that.
It's not now that Jerry have all these ideas, since we're in school.
Oh boy.
Anyway, I must take the opportunity to congratulate you, Jerry. I had my book in my house, of course. My mother read it from cover to cover. Jerry dropped it by my mother, and instead of giving it to me, she kept it for about 2 weeks and she read it. And then in my house here, my daughter-in-law took it, so I don't have it right now. Because when Jerry sent out this thing this afternoon about us being online, I said, let me get the book fast, because maybe he might want me to say something, but I can't find the book. then I remember my daughter-in-law took it.
Yeah, actually, it's a good thing, Khaled, because I've just commissioned a new edition, a special edition, which will be in full color. I know that in the old days, but probably still, printing in color was a very, very expensive thing because you had to have different plates and so on. But so that's why I just went ahead and did it in black and white, which was a shame because especially with my paintings and so on, to see them in black and white was quite a come down. But the impression I'm getting, I've yet to get the bill, but the impression I'm getting now is that if you print in color, it's not that much more expensive. So the new edition should be out soon. And everybody who got an old edition could trade it in for a new one.
Oh, okay, good. And I
Okay,
must say that
thank you.
I'm
Thank
very
you.
happy
You
to
know,
see Heather.
I hearing the QRC boys talking here, and they're talking about Latin teachers. I went to one of the, if you might to call it the lesser schools, I went to a school called Mod Second San Fernando, and we had a guy called Aubrey Garcia, who was our
Yes.
principal. And, we heard
We
that
know
he
him.
came to QRC. Is that a fact?
Yes, we used to call him Audrey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
had
he
a
was
big-
one. Yeah, he
had
was
a
one.
big
Sorry.
PA 144.
Wow.
And
Yes.
well, he used to cane people too, eh?
Yes. Well, the thing is, he was after Mr. Latu left, we had Mr. Jones, and then we had Aubrey. And by that time, the school had gone down, and he wanted to try and bring it up by being a strict disciplinarian. So he used to walk around with his whip, but nobody took him on at all. We really didn't take him on. Mr. Latu never had a whip. Mr. Latu never had a whip in his hand, but believe me, he scared the crap out of us.
Yes.
Well,
All he had to do was, to look at you.
Yeah, just look at you.
Yes, this
And
story
then the
about
thing is, he
Mr.
was a nice
Garcia,
guy.
you know.
This
There
is the
was
first time
one history
I've
book.
seen Heather so close, because I was always frightened to get too close and watch her.
Exactly.
Hello, Heather.
We were
Hello.
using a particular history book in high school in Modsec, you know, and then Aubrey took a year off and he wrote other book. And we were all forced to buy it. And the history master, a fella called Babwa, tell us, don't bother with he book, no? Only read the Hall and Recon, and I can't remember the other name. He said, because Mr. Garcia book is okay, thank you, and we'll be moving right along. Our next reader is a teacher, a stage manager, an actress, and everything else. And I am sure that she doesn't carry a cane. Ladies and gentlemen, Natasha Gray would be reading. Natasha, go ahead.
Thank you for having me. I have 3 pieces that I'll be sharing with you today. And the first one is stick fighting. Ken's foreman was a huge guy named Killer Whale. He was the national stick fighting champion for 10 years straight. He looked like he ate cement and bent the half-inch rebar for the ring beam with his bare hands. He was a gentle giant whose wife would often put him out on the street. After completing a window, a skinny Indian guy said proudly, "Look, it fit like yam in a net." That is when he realized it was Whale standing behind him. Whale said, "Yes, go on." One weekend, my dad was staying with us, and I asked Whale if he could tell us about stick fighting. Over a flask of punch and rum, he began to expatiate. On Fridays, the rum shop owners would sponsor fights to sell their liquor. People would form a ring and sit on the floor. With the drums beating, the 2 combatants would enter the ring. The referee would inspect their bois for any sharp devices. It seems some fighters would insert a nail in the bottom to gouge out the eyes of their opponents. I asked him if they used Mora wood for bois. Mora is known as ironwood because of the metallic sound it makes when it falls.
It is the hardest wood and is used for making rafters. He said, nah, more does brick. We does use pui. Pui does flex. I couldn't imagine breaking a piece of mora over a man's head. And that was stick fighting. I'll go on now to the other piece, which is entitled Robbie. Our geography teacher was old Mr. Goddard, a tall, devout man who ran the Youth for Christ club at the school. For some reason, before each of our classes, he'd kneel down and ask for the Lord's help. He was a gifted illustrator and once spent half a period drawing a detailed map of South America, shading in the relief regions in various colors. He also put out Robbie out of the class, which God advised him to. Standing outside, Robbie noticed the principal coming up the stairs with a whip in his hand. That didn't bode well. He had to think fast. The only valid reason for being outside a class was if the teacher asked you to clean the duster. As such, he ran into the room while Mr. Goddard's back was turned and quickly erased the map. He then went back out and pretended to be cleaning the duster as the principal passed. Mr. Goddard was just about to begin the class when he turned around and saw that the map was missing, with Robbie outside blowing on the duster. He knelt down and began praying again. I once asked Robbie about his ambition in life. He said he wanted to be a professional skylarker. He just needed someone to pay him to skylark. Many years later, when I was stressed out flying the DC-9 into high-density areas, I decided to do a course in transcendental meditation. TM was popular at the time due to the Beatles' involvement with Maharishi Yogi, who would turn out to be my instructor, but Robbie himself. He gave me a quick lesson and charged me $700, proving that he had achieved his goal. I never bothered to meditate since I didn't like the stupid mantra he gave me. And that was Robbie. And finally, my third piece is entitled Oswin. My next brother was Oswin, who was from Bethel Village in Tobago. He was tall and handsome, and I was honored to be included in his close circle of friends. He spoke with a Tobagonian accent and would say things like, shit is shit, but damn shit ain't no shit. Words of wisdom, which I often quote. When annoyed, he would describe someone as being a bottom scratch or a Ans Bamsi. Don't ask me to explain. He was a regular on our boat trips to collect marine specimens for our saltwater aquarium. We'd free dive and catch fish hiding under rocks using a mosquito net. My dad's old 16 HP West Bend outboard motor was unreliable and often gave trouble to start. During one such occasion, Ozzy wanted to put the throttle on full and start the engine in gear. I warned him that if he did that, someone would fall off the boat. He did it anyway, and yours truly went flying. The boat shot off with a bunch of guys who didn't know how to drive. I waved my hands in the air to attract their attention in case they didn't realize I was missing. They eventually did and turned around. The boat was now coming to me at full speed, and I had to dive to avoid being run over. During the holidays, some of us spent a few days with his family in Tobago. His mother was pleased that he had Indian pals who were so close. We were surprised since we never considered our racial differences. While there, he introduced us to pakro tea, a local aphrodisiac. It's made by boiling an intertidal mollusk that clings tightly to the rocks and drinking the water. Many years later, on a flight to Tobago, my co-pilot John complained that he was having difficulty keeping up with his second wife, who was young and steamy. He said that after a few rounds, he'd be shooting dust. I told him about the pakro tea. When we landed, he spoke to the station manager and asked her to get him some. On a subsequent flight, he told her the pakro water wasn't hacking it. He needed something stronger. She said there was a fish head which was supposed to work better. He told her, give me the whole fish. And that was Oswin, Robbie, and Stick Fighting. And it was my pleasure, good sir, to read your work. Thank you.
Thank you. I am honored. I wish you could read you. I wish you could audio book and just read the whole thing.
Just message me, tell me when are there.
Lovely.
Yes, indeed. I think for an audiobook, Natasha is the ideal person.
Yes,
definitely. Definitely. We'll keep in touch, Natasha.
No problem.
Okay, any other comments from the audience?
Well, those were hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Yeah.
What about you? Did you have any boy days of your own?
Of course. Sure.
If I can say something.
Yes, Harold, that question, was that directed at me or to Harold?
Let's say what Trevor has to say, but take everything he says with a grain of salt, okay?
Wow, okay.
Okay, Trevor, go ahead.
The story you're about to hear is true. I said the names have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. No, it's just that I mean, I've known Jerry, and I wrote it forward to the book. I've known Jerry for many years, you know, since primary school actually. We went to Tranquil together, so we experienced Mrs. Roach. That's one of the changed names. And all those other things, and then of course we experienced the Lal. I was in class with 1 year younger brother Cedar.
Yeah.
And we experienced the gift from modern sect, Mr. Garcia, the gift that kept on giving. We must improve the school, boys, you know. And so we were. But I tell you something. This book is, when I was reading it, and I know many of the stories because I lived with Jerry as well, I just could not help laughing. My wife would ask me, what is Jerry's book again? I said, listen, and Jerry writes the book the same way. When we get together online and we're talking, he wrote the book the same way he speaks when we are talking. It's just story after story after story. And it's been really a pleasure. It has helped me to relive some of my boy days. I really highly commend it to anybody who wants to read and understand what it's like to grow up as a Trinidadian boy. A true Trinidadian, to the bone, that's what Jerry is. And when he talked about, in particular, the school in which we were all groomed to be men, and how cosmopolitan our group was in terms of both the ethnic and the social makeup of the boys who got together and had one common culture. Understood and loved and feared and respected teachers like Mr. Alto and others. It really is a great loss to the country that it doesn't seem as if those kinds of teachers who had that approach to bringing up young men exist in any large quantity again in the society. But great book, and Jerry, my question to him was, how did you find the time to write it?
Oh, well, if you tuned in earlier, I would have told you it was like between 2 and 6 in the morning.
Yeah,
But,
I saw that.
Okay, thank you, Trevor, and thank you,
one other
Jerry.
comment. One other comment.
Go ahead.
Talking about, the cosmopolitan culture and how, QRC was instrumental in making us, what we are. Obviously, I wanted my sons to go to QRC. And my wife put her foot down and she said, no way, because she didn't want them to turn out like me.
Okay, thank you. We have been talking about Jerry's book and talking about boy days and Trini stories people write about him. And I want to mention that in our group here, we have quite a lot of authors, people who have had their books published. We have people like, we have Gusha. Heather has quite a few books about her girl days. We have Harold Graves, who have his books about his boy days. We have Krishna Samaru, who has a wonderful book. Krishna, remind me of the book about your school days. Last day of class. And
the Novarians is the one about growing up in Grandy.
Yes. And we have this last day of class. We have Vishnu Gosai, who have quite a few books about his I think I can see one on my bookshelf there, the 12 O'Clock Man and other stories. We have a fellow called Motilal Guru Singh. He has 4 short stories called, well, they are the Kahani series, and they talk about his boy days growing up in Pinal. And we have poets like Kampa Prasad. We have Arlene who working on a book. So we have, in this group here, we have quite a number of writers, and if I may say so, some excellent writers. So for the newer people in here, you could probably look at the names and go on Amazon, and some of our books are there. So that is just a little bit of commercial. So we're moving right along. We go to the next reader, who is Alicia Lawrence. Alicia would be reading My Arrow by Boat and My Brother Keith. Take it away, Alicia.
Moti, I am not seeing Alicia. Are you seeing her?
Not seeing Alicia.
No, I
Alicia.
can't find her. I don't know if she's under another name.
Okay, well, if Alicia is not here, we'll be moving along. I also like to mention that our group, Poetry and Prose, we produced an anthology last year, Musing in a tea shop. And in that anthology, you would find, yes, look, Heather highlighted it, yeah. Heather, we highlighted a bit, Heather, where you?
Yeah, and we're all in this book.
Yes, so that we have quite a lot of the writers members of Poetry and Prose in that book. So I would ask people who haven't read it as yet, you could go on Amazon or you could contact Gusha and you'll get a copy.
Yeah, and I would like to say, with all that we've done since then, I think that it's time to put out a second volume, because there's still a lot to be said with a lot of good writers to be put into a second volume of that kind of book and created.
Yes, Harold, that exactly so. And well, initially we had planned to say one every year, so we could be working on that. And again, Harold, we would need your help too.
Sure, be happy.
Looking forward to some of these newer people who would like to contribute. So keep on joining us and keep on looking on Facebook and you'll get the information. Okay, so
Motilal, excuse me, Motilal, but Shahiba wanted to do a reading as well.
Yeah.
Yes, we come into that because we're going to
And Moti, I was now going
Shahiba,
to say,
and
What-
we also have the author. We have an author reading, Jerry Barrow, and we have Shahiba. So I don't know, ladies first. Shahiba, shall we have you, or you want to have the last
Yes,
word?
I will go first because mine is very short.
I know in my case, was my wife, she always want to have the last word, you know. So
I have that anyway.
She has the first and the last.
not be I again that at all. Let's see the way. Yeah. Go ahead.
So mine is called Fat Carol. In Jamaica, I shared a house off campus with Colin and Liz, the sister of another QRC friend. Even though she was our age, she was like a den mother and called us by our surnames. Sadly, she would die a few years later for what we didn't know. It's possible she was sick all the time, but never said anything. Money was tight, and we pooled our limited resources to stretch things out. One bottle of squeezy had to last the term. I ate beef patties for lunch every day for the next 2 years. The lady would take them out of the oven when she saw me coming. We had dinner by a woman called Fat Carol who lived up the road. We called her that to distinguish her from the two other Carols we knew, Normal Carol and Cockroach Carol, who was small and shriveled. Fat Carol had to be the worst cook in the world, but needed the money to support her young son, Alex. She bought chicken necks wholesale, which she alternatively stewed and curried. The first time I ate it, I nearly choked. On coughing it up, I realized the necks still had feathers on them. Another time, she proudly served us pudding for dessert. It was mauve in color and had the consistency of an eraser. Stick your knife in it and not even King Arthur could pull it out. So as not to hurt her feelings, we wrapped the dense slab in napkins and said we would take it home to eat it later. When we got there, we grabbed our landlady's dog, Fluffy, and shoved the pudding down its throat. The poor dog started to cough and gag. After that, he would run and hide whenever he saw us coming. Would you believe she served the same thing the next day? Only this time, she froze the batter and called it ice cream.
True story.
Good. Thank you, Shariba. I am looking forward to hosting you as the author of the month in maybe a few months' time when you get your collection together.
I don't write, I paint.
Anyway, thank you. That was wonderful. Any comments from the audience?
Yes, can I interject?
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, Winston Rajkumar here. I'm Frank's guest, I guess. Sorry about your experience. Some of the best meals I had in Jamaica was by a woman who cooked for us in Mona Heights. And the meals were wonderful, especially on a Sunday. I don't know. No. I'm trying to remember her name now. This was, come on, 50 years ago. Come on.
No, the thing about it,
the food was great.
Yeah, Jamaican food is lovely and I cook it now. But the thing is that my father was old school. He studied in England after the war when things were rationed. And he had this outdated notion that students studying abroad had to suffer. You know, that was part of it, part of the experience. So, so I was on a shoestring diet.
Budget.
Sorry, a shoestring budget, sorry. And as such, the food we ate was total crap. This is chicken neck was all I could have afforded.
No. Absolutely true. We all suffered tremendously, particularly in Jamaica as a student. But that food that we had in Mona Heights on a Sunday evening was fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah, but this lady was not a cook. She was not a cook. She was an unmarried woman with a son who she had to support, and she had to find some way of making some money. So she offered to cook meals for us, and stupidly we agreed, and it was dreadful. It was dreadful.
We actually paid for Sunday dinners. Yeah, we did. It wasn't free. It wasn't a freebie. No.
I'm sure you'd remember Jamaica was an experience on its own right.
Oh, well, I think my experience with meals and food was the year I lived in Chancellor Hall. That was terrible.
No, Chancellor Hall food was good, but I'll tell you a little story.
Are you a Chancellor Hall guy?
Yeah, no. I was Taylor Hall, but I lived in Mona
Sorry
Heights.
to hear about that. Yeah.
I never like, they're sharing a room with anybody. Sorry, except my wife. But anyway, when she lived in Jamaica, I was a pilot at the time. So now she doesn't really like to cook. She can cook, but she doesn't like to cook. Okay, or maybe whatever. Anyway, so I would actually have to come up to Jamaica and bring food for her. You see, you won't believe this. So what I would do is that I would make some steaks. Grill some steaks. She loves steaks. Empty a bag of flour, put the steaks in a plastic bag, put it in the bag of flour, and then put the flour back in, and then tape it back.
Smuggling.
So because you were not allowed to bring meat into Jamaica.
Absolutely.
So there was a time when I'm passing through customs, and the guy picks up this bag of flour, but because the steaks were frozen, the outside was sweating. So he wanted to know why this bag of flour was sweated on the outside, And I said, well, they must have put it in the hole. And I got away with it. but that will last for like a couple of weeks, and then I'll have to make a trip again and then bring us some more food.
So are you QRC? Are you a QRC alumnus?
Of course.
What year did you graduate?
Trevor, what year we graduated in, boy? 72?
Oh, you guys are too young for me. I belong to the LAL 2 generation.
Yeah, me too. I was there. No, I was there in LAL 2. Trevor, what year it is? I can't remember.
No,
I think I came in at how much?
60.
We don't even know.
I left QRC in 65, actually.
You entered in 65 or left?
I left in 65. I entered in 59, left in 65.
Oh, no. I entered in 65, and then we left in 72 or something like that. Yeah, I think that was...
Yeah.
But
you don't guys.
You don't look it. You certainly don't look it. I'm 70. You look like 65.
No, I'm a little older than that.
You left in 72, Jerry.
72. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
No, I was way beyond that. I mean, when I left Trinidad, the trains were still running,
Oh, that's a long time ago.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, we had friends who used to hop train, which was a dangerous thing.
Well, sometimes you had no choice but to hop the train.
Yeah.
It was nice meeting you guys. I'm not a writer myself. I did a lot of other writings, but not the kind of literary things that you guys do.
Well, the thing is, I could write a book with a lot more stories, but they're just little things, Okay, I'll give you an example. With Trevor and I and our, what we call our band of brothers, we had this thing whereby we would just appear at each other's house at any hour of the night. And he said, you're wasting time. And that means you had to crawl out of bed and get in this car, whatever it is, no questions asked. You didn't know where you were going, when you're coming back. And because it was a support group, we were all under tremendous stress in A-levels. We had personal problems, girlfriend problems, problems with physics, all sorts of, we had a lot of problems. So we were very close-knit. And that way it was like therapy. So if we were feeling particularly down, we just go and wake up one of the guys, And there was one time, my friend Terry and I, must have been at the wee hours of the morning, we decided we were going to wake up Trevor, we wanted to go in line with Trevor. So we came outside his window and Trevor was fast asleep. So we were taking stones and throwing on Trevor to try and get him to wake up, but he wouldn't wake up at all. So Terry eventually broke off a branch of his mother's croton tree, reached around and poked Trevor in the stomach. Trevor, we were all doing karate at the time. Trevor flew out of the bed and did a complete kata in his sleep. And then we said, Trevor, you're wasting time.
I do like the concept of boy days, though. Frank Mohan would tell you I grew up in Sound. I basically lived in the Quasi. And, as I say to people, I was either going to get out of the country and go to university, or would have been a badger in the Quasi. I would have been dead by now, like a lot of my friends have died in, not having gotten out of that situation. So lots of boy days, lots of boy days.
Well,
Good
I think
and
anybody
bad.
from our generation would have had, and this is the whole point of the book, in that the new generation, the present generation, they know nothing about these things that we used to do, the things we ate, and so on. And I wanted to put it in writing for future generation, for posterity,
Yeah, it's a whole different thing. I mean, I remember when television came to Trinidad. These kids, I tell people I went to University of Alberta in '66 to do geology. I walked in there with a logbook. Then somebody said there's something called a slide rule you could buy in the bookstore. And then Texas Instrument came out with a pocket calculator. And guys were lining up in the snow and ice to go into these big buildings with their computer cards, Watt 4, and all kinds, Fortran 4 with Watt 4. And look at my computer, I can lift it up with one finger, two fingers, Times have changed. We didn't have that, so we had to do the things we did, which was lime in the Quasi, steal, do whatever.
Yeah, we did a bit of that too.
You can't lime in the Quasi now, though, right?
Yes, correct.
Thank you, Winston and Jerry. Certainly.
It sounds like Winston has a book in him, though, so I wouldn't give up on writing.
Listening about the good old days, because in those days we couldn't have met like this.
No.
So indeed we have progress.
It's amazing.
And
nice
as we
meeting you
move
guys.
along,
read my thing.
Jerry, as we move along, I see
Thanks,
listed here
guys,
that
for letting me,
we have an author's reading. So I expect that would be you reading something from your work, Jerry.
Well, I'm now hearing this for the first time, so I'll just read from the introduction. Okay, that's quick and easy. All right.
Okay.
Is it okay to go ahead?
Yes, you go ahead, and then we'll have a general discussion after.
Sure. Get back from there, you're top heavy, shouted my mother as I peered over the side of the Carnage jetty to see the mullet and garfish swimming in the sea. I was admittedly a little on the putty side, but top heavy? WTF was that? What did that mean? To cure this condition, I was about 5 years old at the time, by the way. To cure this condition, she signed me up for ballet lessons with a dance teacher named Helen Mary Kay. The class had about 10 other students, all girls, all white, all pretty. Needless to say, I felt completely out of place, being fat, brown, and ugly. Also, I picked my nose and was ordered to go wash my hands. Ballet is a very demanding discipline with all the movements and positions given in French. Years later, my French teacher would write in my report that I was resisting the language. A lot of time is spent standing on your toes. For a top-heavy guy like me, that was a non-starter. I also hated the sissy ballet shoes. I was glad that none of my friends could see me. The year ended with a concert at Queen's Hall for the students, including us beginners. We had to do a routine, which must have been the dance of the sugar plum bunnies, since we all had to wear rabbit outfits. My mom bought 2 yards of white towel material and got the tailor, Chinapu, to sew my costume. He must have thought a rabbit was a marsupial. While all the girls had small bushy tails, mine stuck out like a kangaroo's. When I did a pirouette, the others would jump out of the way. Since I didn't quite know my part, I take my cue from the girls. That resulted in a space-time lag between my movements and theirs. This was made more noticeable because of the audible thump I made when I landed on the stage. While I didn't get far with my ballet career, I learned to appreciate what's involved in being a prima ballerina. It certainly cured my top heaviness.
Thank you, Jerry. And who knows, we might have had another Billy Elliot in the making. I see that Alicia Lawrence is back, Alicia. So that we will ask Alicia if she could read her piece now, Alicia.
Hi, good afternoon. I must apologize. I don't know what I mean, I'm doing a number of stuff today, and the time is only, I just realized that that this is the time. No. So my humblest apologies, folks, for for not being here from the beginning. I really must apologize for that. Let me see if I can find the email that Gersha would have sent me so that I can read the pieces that she sent. So just give me 1 minute.
Alicia, while you do that, I'll make a comment.
Sure.
If I can. I've been listening to everyone chat, and the book, to me, I don't know if you guys know this movie. It's pretty popular, The Dead Poets Society.
Yeah.
And I felt as though this was like reading, from what I've read, it's like reading the Trini version of the Dead Poets Society. And especially when you spoke about the tradition of waking someone up in the middle of the night to say wasting time. And I think things like that is when our filmmakers and our writers can marry so well locally, in terms of being able to see your work on the screen portrayed like that, where we can really dive in to that experience. So it's been lovely. I feel as though I'm at a table with old friends, and from the participant list, there's quite a few that popped in. And I have to tell you that in organizing this session, the amount of likes, shares, and comments that we received from non-Poetry and Prose members. So there was great interest in your work.
Great.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's very nice.
Yeah, every month we try to celebrate an author and celebrate their work. And it really was an honor to go through your work and to plan this. And thank you so much, Heather. Such a great recommendation. It was, and I hope to see more. And I don't know, I think Winston left, but Winston has a book in him. So if anybody could get a hold of Winston and tell him to start writing, because the Sour Boy Days could be an interesting read as well.
Yes. I would also like to say to Jerry that my mother taught dance. And when your mother teaches dance, you dance. And I have played ballet for a number of years. So I know what you went through. My mother also wanted me to continue with it. And I said, no, I liked choreographing the work, but I was not interested in being on stage as a ballet dancer. And so I can sympathize and certainly understand what you went through, because I have very fond and very funny memories of those years.
Were you top heavy as well? After all, I don't know what that means.
But it had everyone laughing. I loved your stories. I loved your stories, and I want a copy of the book with color when it comes out, so we can read.
I think within the next couple of weeks it should be out. Yeah.
Lovely. Lovely. Sorry, Alicia, I just had to butt in.
That's all right. That's all right. So I'm going to read Yarrow by Boat. I'm trying to put on my laptop here as well, so I can Yeah, just one moment.
Well, in the meantime, I'd just like to say a special thanks to Heather for all the encouragement she has given me. You know, I basically wrote this book and just put it down. This was just something in passing, but she picked it up and she read it. She also sent me some of her work, which I think is brilliant. And I can see all the bracelets on her arm, and I could identify with the characters in her book, you know. So I think, and I try to encourage her to produce some more of her short stories because her short stories are brilliant. So I have to thank Heather for having this forum and for giving me this encouragement and this exposure as well.
It started, all you KRC boys know Neil Chinalion. It started with Neil. Neil found me on Facebook and he put me on to Jerry. And then he said, oh, my friend is writing a book. And I said, well, I just published a book, so I'm interested in what your friend wrote. So he sent me, with Jerry's permission, he sent me the draft of Jerry's book. And I couldn't stop laughing. So, I mean, the way he describes my father, short and what, stumpy?
Short and round, short and round.
Short and round.
He was short and round.
He was short and round. So anyway, yeah. So yeah. So yeah, I laughed from beginning to end. You know, I had a lot of questions, you know, and I'm thinking, I want to know Shahiba and what she thinks of all of this.
Well, I've been living with him for how many years now? What?
About 50.
About 50 years. So I'm accustomed to all this craziness. I just let one pass the next.
I tried to get him to write books number 2 and 3.
Yeah. No, but when he said to me, when I heard this word decided about writing on writing, Jerry has so much to him. He mentioned the astronomy, but there's just so many other aspects. You know, I thought, why don't you give this a chance? And when he started writing the stories, I mean, I think I'm the one who came up with the name Boy Days, because I said, this sounds really the kind of thing. You have so many stories to tell. And as Trevor says, he's constantly, talking about things that they have done and the crazy things. And I'll tell you something, crazy things are still going on. Right.
I think she's still surprised by me because just last night, for instance, we had a talent show at our summer camp. And there was a group, 3 people, one on a pan, one on a guitar, and one on the keyboards. And they were playing this song, and I found something was lacking. So we had some bongo drums there. So I just jumped in the van and started to play the bongos, And then when I sat back down, she looked at me like,
well, did you know that song? I mean, how did you just got up and you started joining into the group, So, yeah.
I still surprised her, which is good.
Well, Jerry, every year we host Poetry and Prose. We host a writers' luncheon where we meet up and we dress fancy. So you are officially invited.
Okay, where's this held? Because
we try to hold it either in Central Trinidad or South Trinidad.
Wow.
So the venue is yet to be decided upon, but you are invited. Bring the drums.
Yeah, but I understand that you have members in Canada, the States, Switzerland, and so on. So everyone here, where people located, just to get an idea.
I'm in Canada. Frank's in Canada. Althea, who's not here today, but she's in Switzerland.
Okay.
And Arlene's in the States, and Helen's in Washington State in the United States.
Okay.
Frank in Canada.
Yeah. And somebody's from Tobago. Somebody here is from Tobago.
Yeah, we've got Tobago in the house.
And
from now.
And Helen, of course, Helen and I lived a long time in Seattle and up in Port Angeles, so I well know that area up there. Love it very much. And of course, right now I'm in St. James. So we're all over the place.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yeah.
So the one from Tobago, are you aware of Pakoti?
Jerry.
No, I was hearing it. I was hearing it for the first time. Quite interesting. Serious. I'm Tobago by boat, remember?
Okay.
And is Trevor in Trinidad right now?
Sometimes if you're at at Strawberry, you know, these fellas come with the little bottles and they say they have pack water for sale, boy. That good for the back, boy. I
Yeah.
don't know. It
Oh,
doesn't
okay,
look
okay.
too
My husband just told me
it
he
doesn't
knows
look
about
too
it.
how to put it.
Yeah.
Sanitary to me. So even if I
Well,
wanted to try it, I don't think I could have kept it down. And
Well,
okay, we have Alicia with us again back, Alicia. So let
Yes.
us highlight
Melissa
Alicia and she
was
would
saying
read
something.
her piece.
I was saying my husband knows about it and he has tried it. So I don't know if he tried it since he's been married to
Alicia,
me, but I'm going to ask some questions.
Alicia,
No,
if you tried it, I am sure you would know.
Yes,
well,
I know
it-
about it. I know about it. I don't think I've ever had it though, but I know about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it seems that some Tobago wives will tell their husband, boy, go and scrape some pack off the rock, yes?
Yes, correct. Because it's usually something for men. So
Yes, that was.
Okay,
very
Alicia,
correct.
let's
All
go.
right.
Let's
So
get your reading.
I am doing Mayaro by boat and my brother Keith. All right. Mayaro by boat. Without proper nautical charts, I'd use a primary school atlas with a map of Trinidad to navigate towards Icacos. When I reached my ETA, estimated time of arrival, there was no land in sight. I checked my GPS coordinates and realized we were in Venezuelan territorial waters. Expecting the dreaded Guardia to appear at any moment, I made a quick course correction. We arrived at Icacos at dusk and were greeted with a magical sight. There were dozens of abandoned oil platforms in the sea, with people living on them. As far as you could see came the warm glow of kerosene lamps. It was like a scene from the movie Waterworld. I doubt many people know about this. The next leg of my journey took us along the south coast. By then it was pitch dark. As we passed the coastal villages of Maruga and Losiro, people flashed lights at us. These were smugglers thinking we were bringing in their consignment of guns and drugs. I speeded up in case they thought we were skimming and started shooting at us. This porous coastline is very near to Venezuela and is a popular transshipment point for contraband. Every month, dozens of Venezuelan migrants arrive here to escape the economic hardships in their country. While some people complain, I say the more the merrier. All the Venezuelans I know are decent, hardworking people. Slack Trini workers living on their phones can learn a thing or two from them. We reached Galeota Point around 9 p.m. We had been out of cell phone range for most of the trip. My mother was convinced that we were lost. She alerted the Coast Guard, who said they'd go look for us the next day. By now, we were in sight of Mayaro. The miles of deserted beach were black, except for a fire which Khalid had thoughtfully lit for us. So that's Mayaro by boat.
Okay. Alicia, do you have a piece also, my brother
Yes, my
Keith?
brother Keith. You want me to read both of them and then we do the comments?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, fine. Keith and I, my brother Keith and I slept on one bed and had to share an old threadbare blanket. The nights up on the hill were cold, so we tried to hug as much of the blanket as possible. Sometimes there'd be a storm at night with the wind blowing the rain through the windows. Instead of closing them, we'll just hide under the covers. It was like camping. We didn't consider St. Joseph to be our home, so didn't give a shit. My dad would come to wake us for school the next morning and find the room under an inch of water. He said angrily, "Didn't you know it was raining?" Rain? No, we were fast asleep. Keita and I were partners in crime. We had our ups and downs, but always came together during an emergency. One interesting incident occurred when he was roasting cashew nuts in the bedroom. While lying on the bed, he cooked them one at a time by holding them over a candle using a pair of pliers. This was too slow a process, so he decided to speed things up.
He got an empty paint can and filled it with dry leaves and twigs. He placed the cashew nuts on top and lit the bundle. At first, things went well until the cashews ignited. They began to emit jets of flammable gas like mini flamethrowers. The whole thing erupted like napalm in the room, setting the curtains alight. To save the house, we threw buckets of water on the flames. This caused huge clouds of smoke to rise, blackening the walls and ceilings. We had to move up fast since Dad would be back soon. While we never got licks from him, we didn't want to chance it. You can push a good man only so far.
She seems to
Okay,
be
thank
Prose.
you, Alicia. Any comments before we ask the audience for any comments for the program this afternoon, please?
Oh, I think it's been wonderful, Modi. Absolutely wonderful. Great deal of humor, a lot of laughter, beautifully written little anecdotes. Each one is a little gem. It's really quite wonderful.
Scrubbed the walls,
Oh,
painted the ceiling, and cut away the burned edges of the curtain. No one ever noticed a thing, including the fact
that the curtains were a lot shorter.
Okay, thank you again. I wasn't hearing you, Lisa. That's why I asked for comments.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask Krishna. Krishna's off for lunch. I want to ask Shahiba before I ask her husband. Ask Shahiba, what do you think? We're hearing other people read his work.
I think it is lovely. It really is lovely to hear, the other people read the stories. They've come alive, from words written on a book. I am aware of most of them, and some of them in more details than other. I'll tell you that, how crazy it gets. That last story read about Mayaro by boat failed to mention that this was the very first day that we got the boat from Penny Commons Young from Bowen Marine. Never used it before. And Jerry jumps into this boat with my son Mikhail and a friend, a fisherman, and decided to drive this boat from Chagaramas down to Mayaro, going around the other side. So yeah, it's been a crazy life, but an interesting one at that.
Along the way, we checked the gas gauge and it was reading 0. So that was a little concern that we had.
No.
It turned out later that the gauge had failed because the water was very, very rough along the way, and it damaged the gauge. But for a while we weren't sure if we had enough gas.
Crazy.
It reminds me of a story by and a film by the late Al Ramsawak, Payol Goes to Caracas, starring Stokes and Hill. You could find it on YouTube and take a look at it and see what similarities. And Jerry, and I want to ask how do you feel, listening to other people reading your work, and are you satisfied with how we portrayed your work?
Oh, very much so. If I could share something, my father, who's someone I had the greatest respect and admiration for, he did 10 times more than I did. I dabbled in a lot of things. He was an authority in dozens of things. He would get a professional level, he'd drop it, and then go and do something else. For instance, he built his own teletype machine, and he would download satellite pictures of weather. And those pictures would be used on TV by Robin Mirage. Every afternoon, Robin will call him up and ask for the latest picture. And if you spoke to my dad when a satellite was passing overhead and he had the click, 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 he wouldn't talk to you. He'd say, sorry, I can't speak now. And that's just one of the many things he did. Now, he had to get bypass surgery, and he was awaiting, for the doctors to come from away because it wasn't done in Trinidad at the time. And I visited him in the hospital at Mount Hope, and I suggested the idea of doing his biography. I said, I'll bring a tape machine and tape you, and transcribe it later on. And he said, okay, but I can't tell you everything, So I said, okay, fair enough, fair enough. Unfortunately, he died before.
2 weeks after.
Yeah, 2 weeks before even. So, and his grandchildren don't know him. This wonderful man, a generation later, nobody knows him. I'd hate to think that people only know him because of the Dallopson case. That's why I mentioned it to him. But I'm glad for the opportunity to have put something in print. I'm not saying it's the Dead Sea Scrolls that will be dug up 1,000 years from now, but at least if my grandchildren can know a little bit about me, that would have been worth the effort. Let's put it that way.
The fact that other people like to hear these stories or read it and enjoy it, it's really very, very touching to us.
Okay, thank you, Jerry, because one of my book of short stories is Aji or Nani Kahanis, which in Hindi means my grandmother's stories. My Aji is my paternal grandmother, my Nani is my maternal grandmother. And I have documented the stories that they told me. And in a similar fashion, I'm sure that you could do a very good job seeing that what we have read today of documenting the memories and stories of your father. So my challenge to you is to work on it, and next year at the same time, we want to feature your new book.
I'll just give you one quick anecdote to just show the broad range of my dad. When he was young, he was actually he was a special reserve policeman. What do you believe? Apart from a pilot, a doctor, everything, he was also in the special reserve police. And he and his partner went in the forest one day because they'd gotten a report that people were playing way, which was a legal form of gambling. So they sneak up on the guys and they caught them. But one of them started to run. My dad ran behind him and he picked up his baton to hit the guy, and in doing so, he hit his partner instead. So that is just one of the crazy stories about my dad. I could go on and on. I just wish that I had a chance to hear it in his own words, because I like to hear things from the horse's mouth. I don't like to get secondhand information, And I could have written 5 volumes on his life.
Okay, and I hope you do, and we could have you here again. And well, normally we close at 3 o'clock, but
yes,
because it was such an interesting session, and we still have people who want to say a thing or two. So, Aline, am I seeing you there that you want to comment before we close?
Well, I think that I left Trinidad when I was really very young, and I went to school at St. Joseph Convent in Port of Spain. And the books I was reading was about English writers, their classics. And certainly that's part of what inspired me also to be a writer. But what also inspired me to be a writer was hearing about what my grandparents or my aunts told me about the culture of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the stories and about Papa Wow, some people like that. So I look to you, Jerry, and I say you have a gift as a writer. And growing up, I know that very much, I don't know how much the arts were respected at that time, and I don't know since now. And certainly I love the fact that I can look to so many Trinidadian writers or Caribbean writers. And so it's great to listen to you, to the experiences that you have. And I say, write again. Okay. All right.
Okay, well, first I need to get paid for the first one.
Writers write out of love. We write out of love. We want to be paid, yes, but we write out of love because you said that you haven't heard a book of something that's written by your father. You know, Toni Morrison say, when you can't read something that you want to read, write it. So, I mean, yes, we want to be paid, but I think it's love. We gotta love it.
Okay, well,
I think I will echo what Arlene is saying, that I think what most of us do, we do it for love. So, okay, thank you. Anybody else? Before I ask Gusha to make her final comments and close the meeting.
Well, let me just put this in Trinidad vernacular. Jerry, you're gonna stick in your tail until you write another book.
Yes. Okay. Well, Jerry, thank you. Gusha, are you here?
I am.
Okay, so
I
you
just
want
want
to do the final comments and close?
I would love to. On behalf of Poetry and Prose, Jerry, we thank you for allowing us to celebrate your work. It has been a pleasure. Heather, thank you for recommending and for planning. Musilal, thank you for hosting. I love the interview. And I have seen so many new faces today. So that I hope you keep coming back and support local writers. And yes, in closing, Jerry, we're waiting for book number 2. Thank you so much for being with us.
75 years time. It'll be published in 75 years time.
Yeah, it was really good seeing a lot of
We'll check
seeing a lot of new faces
to
today.
the writers' luncheon.
Yeah, definitely.
With that,
Yeah, I will cook. Don't worry.
On behalf of Jerry and me, I want to say thank you all very, very much for the support that you all have given him.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here with us. And
It's
your
a pleasure,
closest,
yeah.
we're depending on you to keep on him as well.
And listen, this is on YouTube, so you can get the video later and rewatch it.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to close
send the
off
link. Could you?
our
Okay.
recording, and then I will leave the meeting open so we can hang out in the parking lot.
Okay. Then.
Bye-bye. Sheila.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, Jerry Gershia sends us the link on email after.
Okay, great.
Yes,
All right.
yeah.
I like to